Good morning. Welcome, everyone, to Political No Brainer, the podcast where we move past winner takes all politics and into real conversations. I'm Jeff Rabinowitz, and this season we're bringing in voices from all sides to challenge assumptions, bridge divides, and build a better understanding of today's biggest issues. And today, of course, I'm joined with my good friends Charlie Heinemann and Beth Burroughs. We're doing this often, which is wonderful because I think we've got some great insight. How's everyone doing this morning?
My dog says good.
He's doing.
On mute because this one won't be quiet.
I gotta let Mia in on this.
Yeah, right. Full dog participation should be
So
required.
today, check this out. Today I just stumbled on this. P.S. It's Facebook, of course. One of the things I do frequently. If you don't want your child to be gay, trans, etc., then just don't have kids. This isn't fucking Build-A-Bear. You don't get to pick and choose these things about your child. You aren't ready to be a parent if you aren't ready to love them unconditionally. So, I mean, that's just an incredible thing. I just saw it and I said, I'm gonna talk about it. Is it us that has it all wrong, or are we really that far out there? I mean, there's literally this whole thing. The other day I talked to somebody who told me their child's gay and they don't want to know about it, and they consider it like if you're cheating on your wife, you don't publish it. So if you're gay, you don't publish it. I mean, we're
Oh,
living in a day and age where I feel like I'm an outcast, a complete outcast sometimes.
I think that. I think some of that you have to believe. I mean, there's always going to be super bigoted people that are no different than what was common 50 years ago. But I think part of it is a backlash to the gender identity politics, if you will, that some people are so put off by the more extreme incidents that now they're just kind of going back on everything. Like, you know what? I'm never comfortable with any of it. So forget, transgender people or multiple different definitions of gender. That I'm just going to go against everything. That's not what I'm completely comfortable with. I feel like some of that's going on because you weren't hearing so much straight homophobia. It seems as
It,
much as you are more recently. There seems to
great.
be somewhat of a walk back by a certain segment of the population that probably was always there anyway, and they didn't feel like a lot of things that we're hearing now, that people feel justified in voicing some things that you weren't hearing that much of 2 years ago, or as much as you were.
So So here's my question, and I wish Kevin were here to answer this question, but I was listening to Steve Bannon yesterday. That's another thing. He was in an interview. I think it was with Chris Cuomo, and he says we're this is basically 1932 in reverse. That was basically his comments. We're rolling everything back. We won't ever have a president like this in another 100 years. And then he predicted that Donald Trump will win re-election in 2028. Chris Chris Cuomo challenged that, and he said, "But you've challenged all my predictions, and where are we today?" And I'm starting to be concerned that that assertion's right. We have challenged all the predictions. We thought Donald Trump was one and done. He resurfaced. I mean, I've chalked it up to a lot of mistakes we've made as Democrats, but um, have we made mistakes as Democrats? Have we pushed the New Deal too far? I mean, for 50 years we've increased it incrementally every year. We've even seen under the George W. Bush watch, George W. the younger Bush watched. He created the Plan D drug plan, which is a $1 trillion addition to the New Deal, where drug medication was made affordable for elderly people. Now they're on this, I call it the wrecking ball. But have we gone too far?
As Democrats, have we gone too far?
As just implementing programs, as just as a government, there's no Democrats and Republicans. When I feel that when we're implementing programs, there's been bipartisanship up until last year. There was some level of bipartisanship up until now. We're at zero bipartisanship, other than I think Chuck Schumer voted for the continued resolution on the budget. But other than that, but there was always the two work together. So as lawmakers, as concerned citizens, have we agreed to too much over the years?
No, I think for every person, for every group, transgender or LGBTQ, uh, they deserve awareness. They deserve everybody deserves some recognition, as they are a part of the United States. So I don't think that we've gone too far implementing programs for each and every one of them, but to go after them, it's such a small portion of the population. I think going after them is somewhat silly. It's, you know what I mean? It's like less than 1%. So going after those programs are really, it's just minute comparatively speaking to the rest of the budget.
I think, yeah, I agree with Beth in that I don't really think, I mean, there certainly is some of that, there was a pretty hard turn to the left in a lot of social, opinions in that last administration. But if you look at, let's say, like this most recent wave of populism, and I hate using that term, but that's probably the most, correct term. So let's going back to like even the Tea Party movement, and then of course that morphing into the MAGA movement. What that seems to do, the power of it politically, is it brings in a huge segment of people who are not interested in politics. They are not interested in policy. That's not why they're on board. They're on board for the rallies and for the camaraderie with this chosen side. And so trying to convince or move them with policy positions is the mistake I think the Democrats made. That they thought, say, like the two big agendas that Biden got passed, right? You got the again, a horrible name, the Inflation Reduction Act, but I think a very good program, and then say like the CHIPS Act. I mean, you can get pretty wonky pretty quickly trying to explain that to the average person, and even more so the person who doesn't follow politics, who doesn't follow policy, And so when you become really effective at just engaging people based on emotion and a very shallow, policy position, it's hard to counter that when Democrats just naturally want to get into the weeds of the what's in these bills and what's in these policies, and I think that's where they lose a lot of people.
Well, so say for example, if the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, just like you said, this is a significant piece of legislation. This is a very technical piece of legislation. This is a piece of legislation that will ultimately make us energy independent. But like you said, in order to understand that, you would have to understand politics. Then comes along a guy, Donald Trump, who says drill baby drill, phrase coined by Sarah Palin.
Yeah.
And that's what the American people understand. We're drilling. And then you got the Inflation Reduction Act, which actually has pieces of legislation in it that pay for 60% of the future of the investment to create future energy. So big corporate America is seizing on that, taking up all that money and creating those avenues for new energy. But nobody understands that. So the Inflation Reduction Act, all it was looked at is this giant liberal spending bill that's going to accomplish nothing. In fact, it's going to accomplish a lot. And in fact, a lot of it's going to be accomplished on Donald Trump's watch, and he's going to take credit for it. When you see these high paying jobs come in, and the Chips and Science Act is another one I think you referred to, you see these high paying. We didn't have chips when COVID came. China shut down. It was a crisis. You couldn't make cars. You couldn't make phones. So Biden stepped in and created the Chips and Science Act, which enabled companies here in America to create our chips. But nobody understood that. So legislatively, Biden was really what exactly he was intended to be, a Senate legislative genius. He navigated the Senate better than anybody could, because of course he would know the Senate better than anybody would, because he was the longest running senator ever, I think. And unless I'm wrong on that figure, he was close to the longest running senator. So
Yeah, and not only you're right, not only will Trump take credit for it when he was absolutely against it, but mark my words, he'll do a better job of taking credit for something that he has no right to take credit for than the Democrats will do when they are completely responsible for it. Like their ability, and of course part of that is his willingness to absolutely lie about anything. I mean, it does not matter. So he will say whatever he feels. If he says it, his followers believe it's true. So he'll just say it in any way that makes it look like this is his. His should go to his credit, and he'll do a better job than Democrats will.
he is the reality TV, the antics dream come true. He is the ultimate. He can I mean he was like, they again we talked about him as a businessman at times. He was pitching buildings that were 70% occupied. The real figure they're shooting for when you invest is 90 to 95%. He said to straight to their face, we're at 95%.
Yeah.
And he created investors. And I said it couldn't be done. I said it can be done in a boardroom with 12 people, 12 potential investors, but it couldn't be done on a world scale. And he's doing it. He's doing it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the most ridiculous things that are just completely off point. I look at his criticism of this judge, the latest one, to try to put the kibosh on him moving, illegally moving all those people to El Salvador, and refers to him as a far left lunatic. I mean, this is a guy appointed by one of the Bushes, right? A hugely championed by the conservative Chief Justice of this court, huge ties to Brett Kavanaugh. So this idea of calling him a radical left lunatic, it's opposite day, but he does it without even flinching. And,
It's opposite day.
at least, and his group will just cling on. Oh, yeah, he's a radical left lunatic. I'm sure if you ask most, let's not say just Republicans, but, MAGA people, who do you, Obama must have appointed him. Had to be, and I'm sure he cozies up to all the left justices. Well, no, that's not true. He's a very conservative judge. So.
But he got it wrong, but that's okay.
He's a raving left lunatic. And, that's, so. How long does that continue to be effective, or at least effective outside of the dedicated MAGA, where it'll always be effective? That remains to be seen. But, I was reading another article this morning, just talking about, you can't just wait for negative things to happen to the country to try to fight this. And I think that's where a lot of the Democrat Party and a lot of liberals are at this point. Like, well, he's going to just screw this thing up so badly. Let's just wait for this impending recession or for these tariffs to reignite inflation. And then we'll take it back at the midterms by piece. And then, in 3.5 more years, we'll have the White House. Like, that's just not a good idea. It's not a good idea to put all your eggs in hoping that we all suffer collectively. And also, there's their ability to spin. There's no guarantees, regardless, even with all this chaos. If things are just as chaotic in a year and a half, there's no guaranteeing that we're going to be able to get the House back or the Senate.
Well,
need some leadership in there.
What is the odds of us getting the House back? I like you said that the Senate map's really difficult, but what is the Senate's really where I'm focused on, because that at least stifles his ability to put more conservative judges out there, because that is a long-term effect. That is not an executive order effect. That is a lifelong effect. But
the problem with the House as well, and I didn't realize this till I saw something yesterday about it, very alarming, that because of population shifts to red states, like we are poised to lose a bunch of seats. There's this, I guess there's a new calculation that's going to go into effect in the coming years. And there's like 10 states that are going to lose a significant number of seats, and they're all blue states.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear that.
Illinois, New York, California. I forgot some others, but those are the main ones that are losing out, because people, according to this one person's opinion that I was listening to, was because people are fleeing high taxes and high regulation. Certainly, that's the case in California, I believe. And they're shifting populations to these redder states, and those states are going to end up getting more congressional seats. So that's another problem I didn't even realize really existed with the House. I think it's got to be at least a coin flip, maybe a little bit better chance that the House seems to be more prone to swing midterm anyway. And it's hard to imagine that this tariff nonsense isn't going to really still be causing trouble with the economy in a year and a half. So I think there's a very good chance they'll take the House, but I don't think there's a very good chance because of the map. The Senate seems quite a bit of a reach, at this point. But again, the leadership level. I mean, you've seen the numbers. The popularity of the Democrats is like all-time lows now. And there's no real voices I've heard, maybe, the guy from Connecticut there,
Connecticut.
He's doing a lot of television lately. He seems to be one of the stronger voices that you're still hearing out there. You mentioned Chris Cuomo. It's not beyond the realm of possibilities that the savior could be his father with the kind of hard-nosed, I was reading something about that yesterday about, the Mario Cuomo and the Ron Emanuels may emerge as the best weapon, because they are, farther into that kind of sleazier, hard-nosed politics that the Republicans play all the time. So maybe we need an asshole. Not me. We do. We need our own asshole. Maybe it's Cuomo.
A senator in Minnesota that he wanted to pass the Trump derangement syndrome.
Oh,
yes.
I thought it was Texas, but the one who got busted like later that week for soliciting a minor. Yeah.
Yes, he was a senator from Minnesota.
Yeah.
They have to replace.
Of course.
Well, hopefully they're angry enough, that they'll. I doubt it will go blue, but you never know.
Well, that guy, there was a senator in an airport that solicited a male prostitute in the bathroom, a Republican conservative senator. I believe he also was trying to push conversion therapy, like you shouldn't be homosexual. And he said, I'm a tall guy, so his foot wound up under the stall wall. But they said, yeah, that's great, but you did 9 other things, including wave your business card under the stall wall. And but hypocrisy is no issue any longer. It's the other day I was watching a conservative comedian, somebody, of course, I get all sorts of Instagram reels, and there's this, he says, you call circumcision a circumcised penis, he used a different word, but we just call gay, and people that go to heaven, and everybody laughed. And I'm certain that within this hypocrisy, 3 to 5% of this giant audience is gay. But it's okay, it's okay that, you're just revering this funny comedian. But so we can no longer argue the point of hypocrisy. That's something Democrats do to the point where it's almost like they're also at fault at certain times of hypocrisy. So arguing that point, but like you said, we do need an asshole. I always thought we needed a Josh Shapiro, but who knows? When we talk about an asshole, my biggest concern is if our newest star is Angelo Ocasio-Cortez or something. I really don't want to go crazy left, socialist. I'm still a capitalist. I believe in being able to get ahead and not necessarily wait on the government to do that for us. So, but the emotional connection Donald Trump has to people, they see the casinos, they see these big buildings with his name on it, they see the success. That was what America was about, and was, not necessarily building giant buildings or casinos, but having your own home, having a car, being able to put your kids through college. And Democrats haven't been able to seize an emotional connection with their voters. They don't have a signature item, which is something I always said in the restaurant business. You have to have a signature item. You can't have mom's cooking. Go home for mom's cooking. When you go to a restaurant, you want something in particular that they have to offer. Democrats don't have that. It seems like Republicans do. Even though it's this crazy approach, Steve Bannon said it in his interview, we call it Project 2025. Donald Trump said during the campaign he'd never heard of Project 2025. And then, of course, they're chapter and verse, they're executing Project 2025. So again, they lied. Donald Trump lied about never even hearing about it, but he's getting away with it. So whether it's an asshole we need or a politician with some sort of really strong vision, what would that vision be? What would that asshole appear to be? That's my question, is how are we going to prevail? Because ultimately just bashing Trump isn't getting us anywhere. We keep pointing out all his flaws. We keep pointing out all his lies. We keep pointing out all his hypocrisies, and there's nobody's wavering on their opinion of him.
We need our own jalapeno poppers, is what you're saying. Project Jalapeno popper.
We need our grilled wings.
AOC and Bernie Sanders were out doing those town halls in areas where the Republican congressmen were too afraid to do them, and they got a lot of it. They got a lot of attention.
I heard that. I heard that was pretty strong. That was,
He made a really excellent speech that made really good points. Like the minimum wage being equal to the minimum cost to live. Like she fought a lot of points, and Democrats have good points. It's just, I don't know if it's a likability thing or if it's just people are so not maybe the Democrats aren't being as transparent as Republicans are of exactly what these bills or these things are going to do for their lives. I feel like a lot of Republicans feel like when they hear of any kind of spending that it's coming out of their pocket, when really it's such a small amount overall. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I agree. And not only that, but like I said, I think in a podcast or two before, when we think about government spending, when we think about government programs, when we think about government employment, it's a significant part of our economy. If we were to really gank food stamps, for example, Walmart stock would plummet, which is in a lot of people's 401ks. So, um, we as Democrats, we don't convey the message that we have a realistic approach. We don't convey the message well, whatever we do. I believe what we do is a lot of good. Bernie Sanders is an incredible politician. The problem is I just Googled that he's 83 years old.
Yeah.
And that's an issue. And then you've got the young Hakeem Jeffries would be an incredible candidate for to really, but then he doesn't seem to relate to anybody other than his fellow congressmen and women.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be like a young Bernie. Like I don't see AOC as a young Bernie in the wings there. Whether that's just personality doesn't come off that way, or generally, it's slight differences in policy or something. But I just don't see her picking up that mantle for whatever reason, and you don't see a lot of that. I mean, he has a certain charisma about him, an ability to project those views that just seems to go beyond anyone else you really see in the party. Now, how do what's the answer to finding better leadership? I don't know.
She's too left.
Look harder.
AOC.
Well, I've talked to Democratic people, Democratic leaders, party leaders, and they said they are working harder. They said, I pointed out to them during Obama, we lost 1,000 seats all across the country in local government, school boards, and they said now we're putting candidates we are working hard to put candidates in every election. Whereas prior to that, there has been so many unopposed positions across the country that Republicans have filled that they're looking to change that because there was that macro micro issue. We're always focused on the big issues, the big candidates, and we've never been focused on the smaller down what do they call that, down the line or
Well,
but down the ballot tickets. And that's the start. I mean, if you get a young kid in a position like city manager and you groom him he's the person that's really getting with the community. He's the person really listening to the community's frustrations. That's the start. But the issue are we really 15 years down the road till we get somebody to represent us on a national level that can really make an impact on people's opinions?
yeah. Yeah, there just seems to be so many individual, huge, like big things that are starting now. With he's dismantling the government at such a rapid pace that every day there's a new thing that pops up. Like where you go, oh man, that's going to be a problem. Oh man, that's going to be a huge problem. I look at what they've done, like because my wife still has her student loans, so she that whole income driven repayment plan that millions and millions of student loan holders take, this basic contract that they say, if you borrow this much money, this is how you're going to be able to pay it back. And it kind of gives you a roadmap of saying, all right, even though I'm going to this profession that doesn't pay this much money, if this is what I'm required to pay, that'll work. And what they did with that in the quick dismantling, this wasn't even on purpose, but what happens with those plans are you have to recertify every year for the most part. There's some quirks in that system as well. But so to keep your income, to keep them abreast of your income as it increases so it can adjust likewise. If you fail to recertify, it defaults to like the highest level.
Right.
And what happened with the system when they took it down, so like my wife got in a little sweet spot. She did her recertification application. So she got it in, but it's just frozen. So now she's frozen, even though she's made significantly more money in the last year, it's frozen at her own rate. So it benefits her. Most of the people who hadn't even started the application, because they can't even start it now because the system has been down for months, all those loans are diverting to the highest level. So I just read the story of this woman, this attorney. She was at $500 a month. She is now at $2,500 a month. Like, she is going to default, and there are going to be millions of cases like that until they get this thing fixed. And they've just switched it to this other office, right? The Small Business SBA or something, which on the same day that they cut that office's workforce by 40%. So like, there's just one little bubble that I think at this point is unavoidable. It's going to be thousands and thousands of defaults on these loans.
Well, there already are.
Yeah, but that'll be like, but that's just one blip, one catastrophic one from like one decision of the hundreds that you can't even keep up with that he's doing at this point. I think that's part of the problem with the reaction is like, there's so much to react to. It's hard. It's like, oh my God, where do we put this focus?
I don't mean to be putting anyone down, but Democrats have the highest number of educated voters. So I don't want to say that, Republicans, they don't deal with that because they don't have student loans.
Well, a lot of them don't. No.
I don't mean to say that, but there is a lot to that. They don't see those issues because they don't have those loans.
But like, we're so in a different area. You look at like farmers, right? Now, what's going to happen to farmers is going to be the same thing that happened last time when he muddled even a little bit with tariffs, right? Just hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. And what did he end up doing? He ended up paying them back out of the U.S. coffers, some of which came directly from those tariffs, but others was picked from other areas. But so, they'll cause all these problems, then pick and choose who they help out to recover, right? So it's like, I agree with you, Beth. Like, the majority of those people in that situation, or a high percentage of them, are not going to be Republicans. They're not going to be, conservative, or certainly not MAGA, and so they're not going to get helped. Even though it's completely not their fault, they're going to get screwed. Whereas, once again, I guarantee with those farmers, once those soybean farmers and the other ones were, hugely affected by these increased tariffs with China, they'll get taken care of. He'll go back and he'll use our money, so it's another way to like get around Congress's control of the purse, which he's just doing in every different way he can. And, if we had, even at half of the Republicans in Congress with half a backbone, there might be some resistance. But that's the other part of this, is that they are just, when we're trying to save, the checks and balances of the system, when one group or a big chunk of one group is just voluntarily giving away their power, makes it really difficult. Now it's all that's left is the judges, right? Pretty much. Right? Congress has made it pretty clear that they're not going to step in and do anything as a whole, right? So all we've got left is these judges, and back to the same problem of no way to enforce it. There's the precedent. As soon as and he's already started to say it, and it's early. It's going to be more and more. They're just not going to follow the orders. There's no mechanism for enforcement. What are they going to? What can the judicial do? They've got no power to enforce. And yeah, I feel like we lost Trippy like a while ago. By the way.
No, I'm right here.
Oh, you are.
I've been listening the whole time.
Disconnected.
No. I actually got my internet service completely revamped. That happened this week. So
I'm like, I think Trippy's gone, but I'll just keep going here.
No, I was very interested. That's why I didn't pipe in. You're right. You're right that we don't have a Congress that's going to step in. He's not listening to judges. We are in a constitutional crisis. Like you said, you've picked out 1 centimeter of the devastation. Your wife was able to navigate the system because she has a husband that's a licensed attorney. And you were able to do the right thing and but people who didn't
really, she just got lucky. It was just timing. She had right before this all collapsed to the Department of Education, because of her timing of when she applied, she had just finished her application and submitted it. If her timing, because everyone goes on a different, calendar of when they have to reschedule depending on when they first got their loan. But if she had just been if she hadn't been due to re-up for another month, she'd be in that same boat with all those other people where, she doesn't have massive loans, but it would go significantly up, and then it affects our entire household.
But that reminds me of when Ted Cruz was on his way to Cancun and inviting his friends when Texas was under some sort of environmental
Oh no, it's when
disaster.
it was the power. Remember, it was the huge failure of their grid. Yeah, in the
Right.
middle of winter,
And
they all lost their heat.
and then I didn't even understand the factors involved, but the people that didn't realize that if there was this power grid failure or there was this increase in usage or something, their bill would climb.
Yeah,
So people were getting 3 times the bill than the month before, but Ted Cruz probably knew the law was incoming. And this is the kind of thing where, but lo and behold, when you see this kind of ambush, when you see this kind of sabotage, and it's generally like Beth said, we're Democrats, where we do well is the educated voter, but the uneducated voter is the ones that get their heads beat over and over again, but they continue to lean towards the Republican approach. Like life is hard, and I'm okay with that. I knew incoming from the time I was a child I would have a hard time, and at least the Republicans are the ones telling me it's going to be hard. So I'm going with them. And Elon Musk says it's going to hurt. We're going to fix the country, but it's going to hurt for a while. It's not going to hurt for a while. This is going to increase the amount of significant poverty in America in a big way. People are going to lose their homes. People are going to default on their school debt. Um, and ultimately their ability to uh, buy cars, their ability, if they default on these school loans, like you're saying, in a big way, their credit's going to be squashed. This is bad what's going on.
yes.
Yeah, with the stock market in free fall, you would think that there would be more activity to get that better under control. But he finally comes out, when they ask him, "Hey, do you see a recession in the next year?" He says, "I don't like to predict that." However, he predicted it with Hillary. He predicted it when he was running against Biden. He predicted it when he was if they won, we would see a recession the likes of 1920, like we hadn't seen before. So he really has no problem predicting that. He has a problem admitting that it's going to happen. And it's funny because before he became president, I did say, I wondered, like looking at his cabinet, I wondered if he would crash the economy on purpose because the wealthy do better when the economy is actually down. Maybe not so much the stock market, but they do have means to get in there and to benefit when people are struggling. And you've heard, now you hear, when they're asking reporters and podcasters and stuff like that, they don't really believe that that's what's going on. They just really believe that he just doesn't know what he's doing. But at the end of the day, either way, it benefits him and his cabinet, his billionaire buddies.
It's impossible to overlook, or it's not right. It's very easy to overlook like the lack of sophistication of your average voter when it comes to things that have high emotional content. I remember when he put his name, his big signature on those initial stimulus checks. And I'm like, oh, no one's going to just look at that and really believe that Donald Trump was paying him out of his own account. People did. A lot of people really did. They saw that name, like, oh, look at Donald Trump. He's rich, and he's writing everyone in this country a check because it's got his name on it. I mean, when you attach like a highly emotional, motivating factor and something like that, I can see how people are easily swayed. I saw this little blurb article, and it truly wasn't something that was going to happen, but it was talking about like, oh, everyone who individually makes less than $150,000 not have to pay any federal taxes. And I immediately told my wife, I'm like, shit, he'd have my vote if he could really make that happen. Now, I wasn't completely honest, but part of me's like, wow, man, imagine not having to pay any taxes at all. Shit. Like it's, self-interest can be very easily manipulated. And especially for people who don't really have the sophistication or the education or just flat out intelligence to be able to even dig just a little farther than a headline and be like, oh no, that's bullshit. That's not going to happen. This idea, this hope. I've always felt that, even going back to 2016, like a big chunk of this new voter that came in, these MAGA voters, was like this simplistic thing of Trump rich, Trump president, Trump make me rich. I mean, having no idea of like where his money really came from, and what a horrible businessman he was, and what a complete, criminal he was, and and how he cheated didn't pay his vendors and things like that. Never got beyond like the simple thing of like he's the monopoly man, and why didn't we just why don't we just elect one of these before, and we can all be rich together, you know, and even after that doesn't happen in 4 years, they're able to shift blame. He can use COVID to his benefit, right? Oh, we had the greatest economy in the history of the world. Not true. Before COVID, it was only because of COVID. And we were on a bit of a surge right before COVID hit. So it's easy to pull that back to people in a simple thing like, oh, yeah, see, 2019, things are pretty good right then. So shit, if it wasn't for COVID, it would just be like that forever. There'd be no cyclical movement of the markets. It would just always be 2019 when, stocks are up and, unemployment was down. And always they're very good at just, shifting blame, whatever it is, shifting to immigration, to Democrats, to left-wing lunatic judges who were appointed by conservative presidents.
Who are conservative judges. I mean, he blurts these things out.
I mean, yeah, there's a reason John Roberts broke his normal precedent and actually made a comment. When Trump called for his impeachment, is like, no, we have this thing called the appellate process. That's a bold move. In terms of what justices usually come out and say, and that's the conservative, Republican appointed chief justice. It doesn't matter. Call him a left wing lunatic. That crowd just follows blindly along.
Well, I think that, like I said the last time, I think people see something in him that they see in themselves. People don't like to take responsibility for when things go wrong. Of course, like if I could blame someone else for everything that I've ever done wrong, yeah, I do it. But logically, I assume that's not going to work. But these people, I mean, they love it. No, as long as they're not holding blame, and the things they blame it on are just so easily,
proven refuted. Yeah, but it's addictive, right? To a lack of having any responsibility and being able to blame all your problems. I mean, that's a big chunk of that MAGA group. That was the voice he gave them. It's okay to be racist. It's okay to be bigoted. It's okay to blame everyone else for your problems. It's not you. It's them, and them is always an easily identifiable, caricaturish group that that you can just point the finger at and turn them into boogeymen, and they're very good at that.
Well, the unapologetic bigot, or whatever you want to call it, the unapologetic bigot, we'll say, I won't use another word, started with Pat Buchanan. Then it seemed to gentrify to David Duke. And then over time came this whole, Trump literally had in his first term the nerve to appoint people like Steve Bannon to his cabinet, chief policy advisor, or I forget what the position was, and everybody's like, this is just unheard of. You really, really want to put a wedding dress on a pig when you do something like that, and it shouldn't be. And Trump opened the floodgates to just do it my way, do it the unapologetic, told the black voters, what do you have to lose? You know what? The black voters looked at it and said, he's right. We've never gotten anything up front. We've never gained. We've never gotten ahead. The little bit we've worked really hard for. Politicians have never done anything. He's not promising us anything, so we can't hold no resentment towards him for not delivering on his promises. But I go back to the original question. We know who he is. We know he's only going to get worse. He has no reason to try and improve. He's really prevailing, getting worse, worse, worse. The race to the bottom is really leading him to great success as far as public opinion. How do we get to that point? We've got to somehow take control of the family car again, because the guy that's got the keys to the family car is bound and determined to run it in the ditch. As far as I'm concerned, he's run it in the ditch, but I don't know how much more he can do. But I believe there's a lot more he can do to really, really ambush everything we know to be. How do we, as Democrats, and I've said, we don't have an emotional connection to our voters. I've said that. We don't. Donald Trump has that emotional connection. Just like we said, he's rich. I could be rich. I want to be like him. I don't want to go to school, owe $1 million in school debt, and then get a job that doesn't even cover the loans, forget about everything else I have to cover. I want to be like him. If I vote for him, I'm going to be like him. He's going to spread the wealth. The trickle down theory has always prevailed in a lot of people's eyes. Ronald Reagan started with it. We're gonna give business everything they need to flourish, and then all this flourishing is gonna come down your way. It never came down their way, but there's a belief it will. How, as Democrats, do we convey a message that connects to people?
And this isn't an answer to that question, but another part of that is also it's the same thing in the social element of it as well. This idea that I lost my train of thought about what I was trying to convey there, but he gives him the same green light when it comes to social issues. Like, oh yeah, it's like no one wants to be a scold, and no one wants to be confronted by a scold. They want the fun, they want the party, they don't want to think about consequences. So and I think the thing that the Democrats like miss and kind of scratch the head, like they assume that every reasonable person, and maybe it is true, every reasonable person actually has the ability to think beyond their immediate satisfaction and think about long-term concerns, if not just for themselves, but for their family, like long-term economic concerns, like climate concerns, things like that, like the need for regulations in very obvious areas like water and air. But people are are quick to push that aside for immediate gratification. And so if getting rid of regulations, across the board in so many areas, and foregoing trying to make a transition to electric cars or something like that, if people say, well, that's not even going to affect me, forget my lifetime in the next 10 years. Well, screw it. I want it right now. So what's going to benefit it right now? If we keep, it's like the drill baby drill bullshit that people love that ridiculous expression. But the way I feel like it's communicated, it is get everything now. Forget this planning ahead for the future. Every bit we can squeeze out of, let's say, the environment or in terms of fossil fuels and things like that. We want it right now. I want this to be the best years of my life. I'll worry about everything else when that comes. And, I think that's lost on a lot of people who have the ability to say, you know what, short-term game is important and gratifying, but we need to think about the long term. We're not good at that as a country. That's why people don't have savings. That's why people don't have backup plans a lot of the time. It's like they get their I remember seeing this a lot when I was in the service industry, right? That a lot of the people who work in that business, me included for many years, was like, the one time you ever got some surplus of money was usually your refund check, right? Your federal. And like how many people I knew, like immediately, like they got that check and they're calling Carnival Cruise Line right away. Like, here we go, got our spring vacation. Like that's like the mindset in general of the world we live in. So that's an easy one to manipulate and make the other side look like a bunch of scolds and party poopers that they're taking away your ability to enjoy the best years of your life. Just because some silly thing like the environment, clean water.
I remember when those tax checks came for I remember talking to a regular at the same place we all worked at, Gators Dockside, Ocoee, and he with his tax return, he was getting the newest iPhone. But I just remember that being the case. Nobody uttered the words, "I'm going to invest this $2,000 in stock."
Yeah.
Now, that leads me to a point. Here's where, when I was a kid, I don't know if I've told this story on this podcast. I believe I've told it on enough of them. I had a small cleaning business. I was stripping and waxing a floor, general rental in Castleberry, and the owner came to me and said, he paid me cash, and he was a pretentious kind of guy. He takes this wad of cash out of his pocket, and he says we had a good weekend, and I don't need any of this to cover any of the expenses of the store. I'm investing this wad of cash in Home Depot stock. It's the first time I'd ever heard anything. I was a kid, like working in the bar business, stripping and waxing floors. This guy's about to give me $500 cash. He's like, you need to take this $500 and invest in Home Depot stock. And I was like, he was being so sincere. I'm like, that's a great idea. And I leave the store, and I don't even know who you called to buy stock. And of course, I went out and about. Holy moly, Mike!
What's going on?
What's up?
What's up, Mike?
Make America better. I like that, brother. We got to go to an Iron Maiden concert or something.
Getting ready 6 weeks. I'll be going to Metallica, Pantera,
I'm
and
going. My
Uh,
wife bought crazy good tickets, but I don't think we're 6 weeks. I think we're further out than that in Florida.
yeah, ours are six. Well, it's 6 weeks. They're playing at Lane Stadium, which Virginia Tech plays Enter Sandman every game, so
Oh yeah.
it's going to
I'm
be.
going 2 days. I'm going. My wife bought 2 days tickets.
Yeah, I did that when I went last year or a couple of years ago. Me and Morgan went to Jersey to see him. It was a 2-day event.
Yeah, we're going 2 days. I was surprised. She sprung for the big bucks. I'm like, let's
But
do
this
this,
show is
honey.
just a 1-day event. So, Charlie, how you been, man?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, good, good.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Wow, I like that beard, Mike.
Good to see you
Yeah.
live. I always just see you on Facebook mugging
Yeah.
out.
Oh yeah.
You haven't been watching the podcast?
Here and there, yeah. Beth sends it to us every time.
Yeah, but whether I can get them to actually watch it is a whole nother story.
I watch parts of it. I do.
That's
Okay.
great.
Yeah,
That's
I
great.
told him, I said you should come say hi to Trippy and Charlie. It's been a long
Heck
time.
yeah.
Sure.
Good to see you, bro. We're going to get you on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Participation.
Thank you.
So that was great to see him. I haven't seen him
Yeah.
in
I
years.
was surprised. I looked up. I'm
Yeah.
like, wait a minute.
Yeah,
Mike.
hopefully taking the dogs away. But I'm sorry, Trippy, you were saying.
So I was just saying about the guy telling me you should buy Home Depot stock, and I always remember, well, there's 2 points to that story, really. I didn't buy Home Depot stock. I didn't even know where to buy Home Depot stock. Of course, I went out and about. That was back in the day when in Castleberry it was Chappies and Puzzles, and used to go to clubs after clubs closed.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where the 500 went, one of them 2 places over the course of 2 or 3 nights. But there was 2 points to that, and the funny thing about that was Home Depot ultimately opened about a mile up the road from his store, his general rental store, and like everything big business, Home Depot got into rentals. And pretty much cannibalized his business. He probably did really well. He owned this giant building on 436 in Castleberry. Probably sold it for a fortune. But Home Depot is better. I still say till today, I worked for landscapers for my uncle for 15 years. They were better at rental business than anybody else. There was no issue with if you needed a sod cutter, they had 10 on the floor waiting for you, whereas the local guy had 1 and it was already out.
Yeah.
So and that's what so much opportunity has been consumed by business and the technicalities to doing business. When I was in the cleaning business, I bought a Yellow Page ad, giant. It was called dollar bill size, $350 a month. I knew the expense was $4,200 for the year, and I always have this dollar bill ad, and that's where people search for cleaning companies. And now it's like Google AdWords, how much, and you ask them, how much is a click? Well, that's the $64,000 question. So I have a small business now. I realize the clicks can be as much as $14. I'm not spending $14 for somebody to click on my name and realize they want a dumpster and we're a medical waste service. So everything's gotten more complicated. And
Wait, so you have that you pay after the fact for the clicks?
For the clicks, once if it's you don't pay for repeat clicks, but you pay for the click.
First click.
So they click on so they can after that for that 1 year, I think, or maybe forever for all I know. I think it's 1 year. They can re-click, and you don't pay for the future clicks. But the point was is they bill it out like it's this greatest system in the world. You say you want to spend $300 a month, that's all you spend. But you could literally run it at 320 clicks and not get a call because they don't even know what business you're really in. They're looking for I'm not in a cleaning business. I'm not looking to clean your doctor's office. I'm just looking to pick up your medical waste. They see medical, things have gotten extremely complicated. So and we don't prevail financially. I haven't. I mean, I'm thankful for my share of the bounty. I'm thankful for what I have. But as far as real wealth, I'm not getting there. But this crisis is going to enable the very wealthy to get extremely wealthier.
Oh,
and
yeah.
is that their plan? And is Democrats in collusion with that plan? Because I've always believed Democrats like to see a giant underclass because that's their voter base. And conservatives like to see that 1% because somehow that's their voter base and enough to keep them winning. So I just don't have the answers anymore. I say, on Political No Brainer, I invite every candidate onto the show. Obviously, we've had some. I would love every candidate to do what Donald Trump did. I think the turning point in his reelection bid this time was the Joe Rogan, the 3 hour, sitting there and just talking about anything and anything. People felt like that he was connecting with them at some point. But I just want Democrats to succeed more, and I don't know how we get to that point.
No,
well, I was going to say, I think you said when things got super complicated, I think you're right. And I think that when it came to Republican voters, it takes a lot more work to dig and do the hard work to figure out what's really going on. And so they just kind of, the Republicans put out just big words, words like no taxes on tips, no, less regulation, more money. So they hear those sort of words, and that's who they align with, even though they didn't really read the fine print. Whereas I think Democrats, they make things too complicated for the average voter. I was wrong the last time we spoke when I said I thought once the baby boomers were out, maybe we'd see a female president. But they did more work and realized that the 19 to 40-year-olds men were the ones who voted more for Trump than the
oh yeah. Yeah, that was a frightening. I mean, because all the things that I kind of relied on, or several of the things that I relied on, grasping at straws and just hoping against hope that this guy doesn't get elected, right? And I used to think, going back 2016, like first of all, like, the country is getting more, ethnically diverse and younger. Those are like my two big things, right? This is what's going to save us. It's turned out to be the opposite.
Yeah.
Right. They have gotten more of the minority vote and more of the youth vote than anyone ever anticipated, particularly men. And that was the other thing. The third thing was like, well, even the men don't vote. Women vote more often than men. They're more consistent with their policies and their politics. And so that, well, that's changed this time around too, because you got like the whole podcast bro vote that was significant. And that was Barron Trump's big contribution, I think, to the campaign was part of that younger vote. But yeah, these new generation of, it's all kind of wrapped up in that incel crap, and these guys insisting that they've been disaffected because they've been emasculated and told they can't be real men, yet they show time and time again they don't have the ability to do any of the things we consider a real man, like, talking to a woman, a real one, not a, AI girlfriend, so they complain that's all been ripped from them. And it's like, well, no, you also just never learn any of those skills, that's particularly for me, a segment of the new voting population that just makes me ill. Those dudes, And at the same time, I feel bad for them. I see these statistics of these, these numbers of people who like come out of, say, like their teenage years without ever having a single, romance, single relationship, or how many are still, a high percentage of people who haven't had a partner in the last 4 or 5 years, at young ages, that's sad. That's very sad to me, and I feel like those are a lot of the people who also get sucked into these conspiracy groups and the whole, which I consider MAGA to basically be one of those, right? And so, there's another huge segment of sadly, our young population becoming disaffected and being drawn to a place where it gives you a finger to point at. This is the person to blame. It's not you. And then that leads to no development as well, right? So if all your energy is going towards complaining about blaming someone for your issues, and you're not working on the issues yourself, you've given in to the fact that you have any control over it. And now it just becomes this cycle of blame and grievance, And that's what it is right now, right? It's grievance politics. Very, very effective. Much more effective than identity politics. And I think the Democrats, have learned that, or to what extent they have learned, they're learning that the hard way. But at the same time, do you want to adopt, that's the other thing too. A lot of the things that we're hoping for, or asking for, or wondering why we're not, at the same time, do you want your party to take all of the worst characteristics of the enemy. You know, that, you know, and again, see, that's using that term, the enemy. That's sad. You know, it shouldn't they shouldn't
Well,
be
no, that's an accurate term at this point.
Yeah, well, that itself is a problem.
It is, and here's the thing. Okay, so there's a couple points you made. Here's when you talk about a young person that doesn't have a relationship, or the video game thing is just destroying the young person's ability to communicate, to actually get out and about and meet somebody, to and make it and ask somebody to go on a date. They're home. They have access to all their friends from home. Generally, they're the friends, the school friends, and generally they're the bro show or the girl show. And then and that's not going to change. Kids are. I always proposed, and I said, could this be an emotional connection to the Democratic Party? If the Democrats were to create some sort of internet, online, dropping life on you school, so kids could literally go online and learn about anything from buying a home. I think I've said this before. What was his name? Robert Kiyosaki talks about working for money and making money work for you. Teach kids how to make money work for you. Teach kids about insurance. Teach kids about taxes, but make those internet courses incentive based, where they literally learn something. They literally accomplish a course like we do online colleges, but they're doing it on their own time, not part of the K through 12 curriculum. Rather than playing video games, they're going online, learning these life skills, and then ultimately receiving something in return. Who knows? A gift card from Amazon. But let's get the kids away from these video games. Let's really create a new K through 12 education renaissance as a Democratic Party. Let's have something we can call our own, because Republicans can really call certain things their own. They can call their relationship with the military their own, their signature item. They can call their relationship with big business their own, their signature item. Democrats don't have a signature item. They don't have something they can say we offer this to you as a voter. And it's like you said, the grievance politics is simple. Nobody's holding their welfare check near and dear to their heart, but they are holding the feeling that they can be like Donald Trump someday near and dear to their heart. They want to walk through a casino like an owner, and they want to get in a limo. And I just want to see the Democratic Party reinvigorate itself instead of spending so, because we all know how bad things are getting and how bad Donald Trump intends to make them, but making that point is not growing our party's ability to succeed.
Yeah, I think that's that would be a good place to start. Of course, education is always a great place to start, right? Because you know you're paving the way for leadership at that point, and you're getting local, which is so important, to keep things local in your mindset. I mean, of course, that's kind of where you have to retreat when times are like this, right? That's what I do. I get smaller in my desire. I think that what can I affect locally, at least at this point in my own life, in my family, in my business, the business that I work at. You got to start. You got to start at that level. Great idea, except like where we seem to be going the other direction in our ability to even influence education, right? I mean, that's
Canceling the Department of Education.
Canceling the Department of Education. I mean, and now, like Charlie said, he's talking about taking the student loans and turning them over to the Treasury Department. Like Charlie, I mean, they've laid off people at the Treasury Department. The Treasury Department will tell you they're inundated with work already. Now you're going to transfer over $1.5 trillion in very complicated loans with very complicated processes. One of the processes, we don't even know what process it's going to affect. Charlie has given 10 years of his life to public service. It's a simple contractual agreement. You give the 10 years, you get your student loans forgiven. The Treasury Department now is going to get this whole new giant stack of books on their hands. They're not even going to know where to start, and people are going to get screwed in the process.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because you're really undermining our entire way of life when you no longer have a Justice Department. If people don't want to go into public service for whatever little incentives we offer them because we're not making good on those incentives, this is not a good scenario we're up against. And fixing this.
Yeah, I'm surprised too. I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal. I try to read Wall Street Journal. I guess maybe it's because it's the most right-leaning that I can actually get through reading, without going crazy. But I think it's a decent touchstone to stay in touch with, with the other side. But anyway, I was reading this opinion piece this guy wrote, and I've heard more and more of this, and I'm kind of shocked by it, how much there really is a lot of disdain among people in the private sector towards people, government employees in general, people in service in general. This feeling that like overlooking all the things that they give up when you go into service, and and the lower ability to pay, they hang on to this idea that I've taken risks that you haven't taken. So like they have so little to attack these people to be like, but you get attention. So it's like, there really is a lot of distrust, disdain, the dislike, all the disses of people in the private sector, even if they've done very well. They feel like, well, I did well because I took chances, and you're working off of my money because you work for the government in some respect. I always thought they kind of either just didn't think about those people or like quietly had, some respect for them. But that's really not so much the case. And I think that's why you're not seeing more backlash. I mean, it's a horrible thing to think of people, especially people, middle age, been in the same career for many years, devoted their time, to have that ripped away from them in the middle of their lives. Very, very difficult to replace that, especially because they're doing it across the board. So a lot of the jobs they may otherwise be able to transfer into are also gone. That's a really rough thing to do to one person, much less thousands of thousands. And you just don't see the empathy that I thought I would see more of from people outside of that. I just didn't realize there was so much antipathy towards people in service positions. It seems.
Well, it's millions of people. It's not thousands. He's laying off millions of people. Yeah. And it's like you said, and there's no when there was talk of him repealing Obamacare, there was rallying in the streets. There is no rallying in the streets right now for what he's doing, and that's concerning to me.
No pussy, nothing.
No, and so you get, again, you build on this reality TV show thing. It's kind of like he said he invoked a 100-year-old policy where we're able to deport enemies of the state, and without due process. Now, due process is the foundation of America. Then comes the argument, well, these are gang members. They're violent gang members. That's all he's airlifting out of here. And there's reason to believe they're gang members because of their tattoos, and they have tattoos on their body that are defining. And if they have tattoos on their faces, that means they're leaders of these gangs. And so there is no need for due process. Well, there is a need for due process. Even if you minimize the due process to at least really verify this is the person you're deporting. But he literally rounded up people, put them on a plane, and sent them off to Venezuela. There's still reports that some of these people had no gang affiliation whatsoever. There's still reports that some of these people committed no crimes whatsoever. So even if you got the due process to the point where at least you could verify you've got the right person, you haven't convicted them of anything, but they may be trouble in the future. But
you look how sinister it is too, this whole Project 2025 thing, like, because I never give credit to Donald Trump when it comes to good planning or intelligent maneuvering, because I just don't think he's an intelligent man. But there certainly are intelligent people in that thing. And I think this was absolutely done, like this test balloon was done precisely for a specific purpose, right? If you're going to test, the ability to ignore a judge's ruling, you start with something that's easiest to sell on the general electorate, right? So you say, these are gang members. And so people are like, well,
yeah,
forget it. Like, look at these guys. There are a lot of horrible, dangerous, violent, Venezuelan gang members, and probably a significant amount of those people that were deported were just that. But I think it's also just their way to test the water, right? And you start with something that's easiest to defend, and you start with that, and so that they can say, and so far it's really worked. There hasn't been, even on the left, the level, as you were just saying, the protests in the street. This is a huge thing to rip away due process knowingly, and then to defy a judge's orders when he calls you out on it. Scary beginning to this constitutional crisis, but also very, very purposefully done by this group that's been planning it for years, right?
For years.
And it's like I said, it reminds me of the beginning of a football game, those first 14 scripted plays. They've had this in the bag. Like they knew exactly what they're going to do, when they were going to do it, how they're going to go about it. And, there's a lot of intelligence in that planning. That's the scary thing. And wasn't that Odom said this? Like, he'll be so much worse the second time around because he's learned from his mistakes, or his people have learned from the mistakes. They've had time to plan how they're going to do it the second time around. And everything has been exactly what we were saying. It's spot on, if not even a little more aggressive than I think even those of us who were worrying the most. But really not that much. I mean, I was really prepared for it to be like this bad. Maybe worse. And who knows? It's only been 2 months. So
it's going to get,
yeah.
I believe, a lot worse.
Sure, because if this is the test balloon, right? What happens when, the next group of people, it's not even close to being something that, being gang members or something. It's some other ridiculous thing, but they're kind of like, they're getting everyone used to it. They're taking away the sting, desensitizing the general public to it little by little, until it gets to the point when it is the most outlandish use of it, it's going to be, it won't have the same effect because they've been slowly making this the norm. Frightening.
It's like you said, and Steve Bannon actually acknowledged it in that interview I watched the other day. It was not Gavin Newsom's podcast. It was something else. It was Chris Cuomo. I said that. And he said, we've been planning this for years, and it's only 1 in 100 years you get a president like this. And then he predicted he's going to run for a third term and win. And he said, and Chris Cuomo is sort of like, how are you saying this? He's going to run because you're going to change the law. Well, you're not going to change the law. You can't change the Constitution. You can't. Yeah, they're talking about.
You won't. you're not going to get the votes to do it legally.
No. Yeah. So, but again, this thing, and Donald Trump was bold-facing. I never heard of Project 2025. The fact that he was saying that was probably in the plans. As a campaigner, say you've never heard of it, but here it is ready for you once you get sworn in as president. Yeah. And they are doing it chapter and verse. And the scary part about it is what we're seeing is what we know about. What's next, we don't know. A lot of what we're seeing is what we knew about. A lot of what we're seeing is what we've heard about. Mm-hmm. There's more to come. I mean, sure. And then, and Democrats, as far as political leaders, as far as the House and the Senate, I don't know if they think this is a good thing, because when they finally retake control of some of the government, they're going to force their own extremely left agenda down people's throats. But they need to take control of this situation, and they need to stop saying they're the good guy and Trump's the bad guy. They need to start saying, here's how we're going to do things differently as leaders.
Yeah, or and that's the other thing that pisses me off about Schumer's move there. Like, I understand his reasonings, and there was logic to some of it. How if we had gone into shutdown, the executive branch as it is now would be able to decide exactly what is and what isn't a necessary component, or I forget the expression they use. The few that they keep around. But also, I think what it probably would have done would have been to push the Republicans in the Senate to do what they're, I think, inevitably going to do at some point during this administration, which is to get rid of the filibuster. There's going to be something they want, and they are going to be the one. Like, it's going to be that. It's going to happen at some point, and it's going to be the Republicans that are going to do it. Even with Mitch McConnell gone. And I think maybe that would have forced them to at least do it now rather than later, so we could get all the cards on the table and say, listen, this is what the game plan is. But, I feel like he kind of allowed them a pass to stay undercover a little bit for a little bit longer. And, it doesn't take long. At this short period of time between now and, the lame duck period.
Well,
if it is such.
Well, it won't be a lame duck period, only because he doesn't abide by any rules. So, I mean,
that's what I was gonna say.
You're always the president. Lame duck applies to if you're going to listen to the Congress. Apparently, he's not willing to do that either, or the judges, which is even, I guess.
That's what I mean. So, in that respect, there won't be
there won't be
a lame duck period. It'll just be a deeper constitutional crisis. Yeah.
Right. And then comes, to argue to point to Chuck Schumer what he did. He was right in what he did. I don't think a government shutdown is advantageous in any way, shape. I mean, the fallout from that, us defaulting on everything, is not. So, but then came the text from Move On. Is Chuck Schumer prepared? Is he qualified to be our progressive leader? And that's not the point. We don't need a progressive leader. We need a leader that can convey a message to Republicans that says, hey, we got your We got your crazy approach. We've lived it. Now we've got a better approach. We don't need to start going from the extreme right to the extreme left. We
Yeah.
need to get to the middle sometime, and that way you minimize Donald Trump's ability to be the radical crash dummy.
Well,
And
in that respect, and you're really looking at in terms of leadership, would be Fetterman, right? I mean, that's kind of who he's become, isn't it?
that
Right?
would be who
Become the
he.
ultimate outspoken, super centrist Democrat, right? On a lot of issues, he's gone way out there. I don't agree with all of them, but it is refreshing, for someone to, stick to a position and not be swayed by, certain elements in their party and trying to please everyone. He's certainly not that. I don't think he's the answer leadership wise, but he's certainly the loudest voice to what you're speaking about there, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I think somehow we're gonna lose ground. That's for sure. And
Yeah.
so if Fetterman's willing to be the guy that takes that hit and says, "Here's the ground we're willing to lose," at this point, I'm more concerned with what's happening than us losing ground.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Uh, and I think it's refreshing when you say Fetterman could be the guy. I'm just concerned that there's enough Democrats that'll say he's not the guy to sabotage any hopes of him being the guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, and that goes back to losing faith in the party, which like I said, I'm at my personal low point in terms of support of the party or belief in the party or hope that someone's going to emerge. I really believe this is the time, and I say I believe it. I don't believe it's going to happen, but I think this would be the time for a legitimate third party to emerge. If this isn't the time, then it never will be, and maybe it never will be. But like I said, because I had saying that I don't think this is going to happen, but I think it would be ideal time for it to happen. I think people really do want a different choice, but that's its own thing. That's such a difficult thing to
Well, you
get
know, it's in
maintain.
I just published a podcast with Laura Lucra she runs the Independent Center. And if you go on, that's the last podcast I just put out there. And she was an incredible guest. And she had a
Oh,
lot of great points. We gotta watch on Laura Lucra. We just put it out there. And I'm gonna get her back on the show. I emailed her to let her know that our show is out there on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So I hope to hear back from her tomorrow or the next day. The third party may very well be just that. It may be a third party. Now, I've always said the third party has zero chance simply because of the logic. If I were to open Trippy's Burgers, I would serve about 20 people on my first day. If I open McDonald's, I'm going to serve an average of 600 to 800 people. You have to be a part of a franchise to really get somewhere in politics.
Yeah.
So the third parties, we don't have time at this point to build a third party. We've got to create a level of thinking within the party.
Well, they have to rebrand. They have to
Rebrand
at a massive level.
at a massive level. Exactly. I am at an all-time low as far as my feelings for the Democratic Party. And it's not because Chuck Schumer said let's not shut the government down. I was a fan of the idea, but like Chuck Schumer explained, that would really give the president significant power beyond belief, and it wasn't the right approach. Now we're through that. We're through the CR. We're through the continued resolution. It passed. We've got to take control of the family car somehow, some way, in a big way. We've got to use the players we have now, not create new players that aren't even elected yet. And independents have so much trouble creating funding that it's not realistic. It may happen over time. It may happen in our children's time. But for today, the Democratic Party needs to get its shit together. And and if they don't, America's in deep deep trouble.
I think like we've seen the last 4 elections or 4 terms, that the Democrats are only there to save the economy when it goes into the shitter. Like, we don't really have any other platforms that we stand on that really excite people other than we dig them out of we get
Clean
them
them
out
up the mess.
after they've wrecked it. That's really, I mean, if you think about it, that's what we've been doing since first
Well,
Bush.
Obama cleaned up the mess. Did an
Right,
incredible job.
yes.
Incredible job. But here was the thing about Obama, and I'm going to talk about the Affordable Care Act for a minute. I've never seen a football team win a game that they had zero chance, the underdog of underdogs, and all the players run off the field saying it wasn't me. I wasn't me. But when it came to the Affordable Care Act, every Democrat was like, it wasn't me. You've done something really good. Claim that success story. Show us how good it is. I always said the Affordable Care Act should be called the Available Care Act. If you're sick, you go into an Obamacare office and you get coverage based on your age and gender. Now, you're not going to be told no because you have a brain cancerous tumor. It's a cancerous brain tumor. You're going to get the same rate that the perfectly healthy guy at your age and your sex is going to get. You're going to get treated. You want to start a small business? You're tired of sitting in the Twitter office. You're 300 pounds with diabetes from working at home for the last 30 years. You want to start a small business washing cars? You can have coverage. You can leave your group plan and have coverage. It was a good success story. Democrats have had their success stories. When you hear Republicans scream drill, baby, drill, Joe Biden was the number one issuer of drilling permits as a president, as an administration. When there was stickers on the pump that said Biden did that, I've said the gas price is a presidential report card. America is the most auto-intensive country in the nation. When gas prices was jumping high in the beginning of his first term, he sent his energy director to Houston and said, "What do we need to do to get you guys drilling?" And they said, "Issue permits." And he issued them. So as far as drill baby drill, Joe Biden can claim that mantle. He is the president that said anything goes. Somebody once argued there was so much regulation. There's regulation on drilling regs. Yes. Can't just there is government regulation, but he issued those permits. So I just feel like one, we don't claim our success stories. Two, we're not very good at the game of public opinion. And three, we need to really improve, like you said, our messaging on what are we doing right other than cleaning up the Republican shitstorms.
Well, we do claim our successes. I just don't think that, like I said before, if you're not watching if the right algorithm isn't coming across your screen, you're not going to get those messages. It really is based on your algorithms. Like, how many people really have cable other than the older, my
Yeah.
dad does, Mike's mom does, but we don't have cable. Like, we have, you know what I mean? Like, we get our news from podcasts and online YouTube and stuff like that. So if that message is never coming across your screen, you're not going to see it. Yeah, it's how do we get to those? How do we reach those people who aren't getting that algorithm, who aren't getting that message? How do we reach those? Unfortunately, I feel like those people are going to have to feel the pain before they realize, what, like with Obamacare, it's not called Obamacare. It's the affordable marketplace. They get their insurance from there. There were people that were voting for Trump who thought Obamacare and the marketplace were two different entities. So yeah, so you like, how do you get that message to these people when it's not in their purview? You know what I mean?
There was literally a voter that said, "I love the Affordable Care Act. It's Obamacare. I'm against." And it's
Right.
like,
There's separate entities, and I don't think a lot of people until it specifically affects them that they're going to raise their head and take notice.
Yeah.
well, you know what? I
Yeah.
I remain hopeful that we're gonna get it together. I mean, like I said, I'm just gonna. I would love for more candidates to come on the show and spend their time with us, telling us what they really feel, rather than sucking people out of all their money and spending $30,000 on billboards. This is free. This is an avenue to voice your opinion. I hope we become the premier candidate podcast. Um, in time.
It will, yeah. You never know.
You never know, because I got the best co-hosts in the world.
Oh,
So
Yeah, Mike was in here. That was
that was he needs
asking
to be
why.
on this. When will he join us? Have you talked to him about that?
Mike? No, I mean, he's usually not home, but and when he's home, I'm not. I'm in Florida, but I've asked him before. Why did you vote for Trump? And he literally said, because I didn't think he would win. And I no, but if you really got down to it, I feel like Republicans are very like instant gratification. They, I said before, probably 8 years ago when Trump first ran, I told people they're never going to overturn Roe. They're not going to get rid of the Second Amendment. These things are not going to happen. And then when they overturned Roe, I had to eat I had to eat crow because they actually did overturn it. Things I never thought could be done were done. So with Mike, I think it's more like Second Amendment. It's certainly not abortion, certainly not anything religious. But when you ask these people, hey, why did you vote for them or Trump? It's more of because that was the person they knew the most. That was the person who had the most energy around them. It had nothing to do about their policies. Half of them didn't even know what the policies that he stood for was. It was deporting immigrants, which a lot of people thought we're spending our hard-earned tax dollars paying for them in a hotel, giving them a cell phone or something. But those things weren't really like, in the big scheme of things. Now we're paying for them to be, held up in a prison. So if you ask Trump supporters, hey, why did you vote for them? A lot of them really can't tell you anything for any reason significant.
No, it's emotionally based, and as you were saying, it's connected to where they get their information, where they get their quote unquote news, and it's starting with the deregulation of the news. We talked about this in a previous podcast, right?
All right.
The Republicans and the far right conservative movement in general, they took control of that early on with Fox News and similar type outlets, and they continued it into the podcast realm, and then they were able to get over, kind of move the needle with the social media, even when there was resistance initially from like Facebook and what used to be, Twitter. And yeah, they're very good at it. This attention economy is the thing that makes politics work now. And the Democrats are so laughably bad. I don't know if you saw that thing they tried to throw out there. As TikTok ad they were trying to do, and I could tell they were trying to recreate like in the video game, kind of like Mortal Kombat, where the characters kind of pop down and they get into like a fighting stance.
Oh yeah, I got that was.
And they got like AOC. I mean, it is so sad and pathetic, and just out of touch. Oh, nice attempt, Grandpa. Like they just look so out of their space. Just I've seen it a number of times, and it's just so cringeworthy. Like, oh God, what are you doing? Or I remember when Jon Stewart first came back to start doing some Daily Show, and he got in so much heat with the left when he was kind of going after Biden. Now this is before the debate. This is before it was really fully out there. How far down he had gotten in terms of his ability, of his faculties. But he does this thing about he's trying to relate. So he's asking about the Super Bowl. It was around the Super Bowl time. And he's like, who you vote? You going for Eagles, or he's talking about the Kelsey brothers' mom. It's like, oh, I'm going for chocolate chip cookies. And they're like, this is, this is what we got to offer. This is how we're going to compete with what they're doing online, what they're doing with social media. I mean, it's, we're playing two different games there. This is like, a little league team playing the Dodgers.
Well, I will say I don't know if you watch left leaning podcasts like the I can't remember the guy Tim something, but if you watch some of the left leaning YouTube shows or podcasts, they don't ever critique their own team. Do you know what I mean? Like Republicans, you don't see them saying they shouldn't have done this, they shouldn't have done, but you do see that a lot with Democrats. And I think it's more because, like the education, like we can say, hey, that wasn't a good move, or that wasn't, in the long run, that was really dumb. And Republicans just kind of eat what they're given. They're okay with it. There's no critiquing there. I mean, there's a show, TYT, I think it's called. Both of their hosts are now, because of the Biden thing, they're now Republicans. Like they had an entire show that was a Democrat, or a liberal show. Now going is right leaning because they critiqued themselves right into being a Republican. So I don't know, I don't know if it's the loyalty, or if it's that, I don't know. We just we know what's right and what's wrong. and looking further, we're going, hey, that's not going to work. And we're able to admit that. But you just don't see Republicans doing that. You will not see a Trump supporter critique their moves.
Well, Trump supporters consider Trump a victim of a witch hunt,
That's true.
a victim of a very successful businessman that could be walking on the beach with 10 beautiful virgins, and he's serving his country. They consider him and then they justify it spiritually too. They talk about this dysfunctional king. He was a murderer and a rapist, but he was appointed to do this and that. And I'm like, well, if you're literally equating Trump with this dysfunctional king, he's not my guy.
Well,
As
even with these town halls, they're not blaming Trump. They're blaming
no,
Musk. They're, like they just,
they're 100% dedicated to Trump.
yes.
I've never seen anything like it. The signs, the Trump signs, I drive through parts of Florida that's very conservative, and there was Trump billboards in people's 5-acre lots in the front of their yard at their fence line. Trump, the entire time he was gone for 4 years. And then they make America great again, and then they change them up at their own expense. I mean, campaigns don't provide 4x8 plywood billboards for people's homes at their own expense.
Yeah.
There is a fascination. He has connected with
Yeah.
enough voters that he's got a good strong base. Anybody can tell me, and I've said this over and over again, he won a big victory. He did not win a big victory. He did win all 7 swing states, but 2 or 3 were by 1%. We did a terrible job in this election process. We are guilty of losing this election. Trump did not win. We lost. We could have done a better job. There was a lot of things we could have done differently. I've said it before, Biden shouldn't have ran. You cannot go to a debate and literally look like you're going to collapse at the podium, and then the White House come out with a statement by 9 o'clock he's done. Well, the president needs to be alert at 2 a.m. He needs to be woken up, and he needs to be maybe give him a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, but he needs to be raring to go, decision making, picking up the phone, calling world leaders. You're telling me my president's done at 9 p.m. I'm concerned. So we did a bad job. We're paying dearly for it. America's paying dearly for it. Conservatives who think there's going to be some pot of gold at the end of this dark, dark black rainbow, I don't see it. But I am always going to build on the theme. I don't feel I'm wrong for criticizing my party. I criticize people I love more than life itself because I believe constructive criticism is the right thing.
Oh no,
I
I agree. We should criticize where they're at. I just noticed
They
that
stick with him. Him in particular. Him in particular.
they
I
will.
still remember he came out of a meeting with the governor of the Virgin Islands, and he comes out positive and Trumpster. I just met with the president of the Virgin Islands. A mid-level staffer said, "You are the president of the Virgin Islands. You just met with the governor of and it's okay. It's just fine. He's new at the business.
I'm
You
surprised
know,
that that we're not more upset about wanting to annex Greenland and Canada. I would have no, honestly, I really would have thought Trump supporters would have been just so far against that and felt, betrayed that they were led down that road. But they're not.
they're not. They're fine. First of all, Greenland said put weapons in our space. If it's a defensive thing, you can have military. You can have military preventive weapons on our land. It, I don't understand the fascination with Canada. Two things Trump is adamantly opposed to: universal health care and open borders. How are you going to incorporate Canada as the 51st state when that's their fundamentals? When that's their core story to success?
I really believe he really feels like it's more people paying into the federal tax, which is crazy because he wants to send everything back to the states. But I really think they're sort of desperate on getting more tax revenue to pay for these tax cuts, which with the CR I think just put us like 4.5 trillion deeper into debt.
Yeah, I don't understand if the tax. I don't know that the tax. But if this
He doesn't look
CR,
forward. He doesn't look ahead and think, okay, he just gets an idea and he runs with it. And nobody says, hey, if we do this, this is what's going to happen here. But then we still have to, if we're federal, then we still have to, money goes out. He doesn't think that way. He thinks like one way. And then people just let him go on with that thinking. I feel like nobody stops him and goes, hey, it's not going to work because. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't have anyone opposing him because the people that did, they no longer are in have a job.
Well,
You know,
that's true.
on a
Go ahead.
positive note, and I just pulled this up, so I was kind of been quiet a little bit here. I was trying to find the name of this show, but I've heard a couple of different times, and I'm finally able to find the name. There is this left-leaning Trump bashing podcast that apparently is beating Joe Rogan significantly over the last month or so.
I
And it's
got it.
Midas Touch. Have you heard about it?
They are not left leaning, but I love them.
They're not, but I've never heard it. I've heard that they do a lot of Trump bashing
Um,
from what I've read.
he's a lawyer.
Mhm.
Um, his brothers. Yeah, I've watched them. They just came out of the woodwork.
But
They
they're
really,
very successful as an alternate voice, I guess, to, like what you're hearing on Joe Rogan and such. I've never listened to it either. So
I've never listened to Joe Rogan. I'm going to start listening to Midas Touch, see if we could do something different too.
no, I watch Midas Touch all the time.
well,
They do kind of show both sides of it in some instances, but they were really good about putting face to or back to back things that Trump would say and then, proving, the absolute opposite of whatever he said. Him contradicting himself. He did things like that.
Oh, I got to work on my Zoom skills. I could do that.
You could absolutely do that. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to talk to Mike about, getting on with you and
That would be fabulous. I just saw him. I was so happy to see him. That's nice.
I would really think veterans would really be up in arms too. You would, with
yeah,
Trump.
there's another segment. You're like, where's the military in general?
That was an important thing I was going to say, and I'll probably wrap it up from there. But I mean, I volunteer at a place called the State of Hope. It's on Lee Road across the street from the Motel 6. It's a repurposed hotel. It's for homeless veterans. Now, here's where I'm going with this. All I heard was we're housing immigrants in hotels in New York City. Now, that is New York City funding that housing. That is not the federal government funding that housing. But it was an issue. And Trump said, but our veterans are living homeless. Now, I have not seen a dime more come towards that hotel from the federal government since he took office. Now, he has been extremely aggressive in his first 60 days. It's easy enough to move some money that way or any of the other organizations that are helping our veterans. We have people for so many different reasons. Veterans are homeless. There's lots of people that are homeless. Like I said, there's young people that turn 18 and time out of foster care that wind up homeless. They just don't get the per diem doesn't even cover transportation to work. Forget about an apartment at these rates these days. But let's talk about homeless veterans for a second. Nothing has changed, and Trump has had time to change that. And let's talk about Biden. Not when his son died of brain cancer. It was called burn pit. It was called the burn. He slept next to burning pits of tires and fuels and waste, and he ultimately Biden passed a $265 billion bill that funds not only the effects of sleeping next to burning pits and when you're serving in the military, it cleared up the gray area of Agent Orange. For 50 years, the government has dithered with the idea that Agent Orange affected our soldiers and affected their health. That's been addressed by Biden. So when we're talking about a military advocate versus Trump being the military advocate, again, I have not heard a single word from the Democrats about the burn bill. But Trump continues to beat this horse that he's the veterans advocate, and nothing's changed in his first, well, I guess we're going on 70 days now. But I would say nothing's going to change in his first 100 days, which is often what a president is measured on in his first 100 days. Nothing's changed for veterans. Anybody can tell me something that he's changed. I would give him credit for that, but I've heard nothing about it. So anyway, I think this was an incredible conversation we had, and I'm going to watch Midas Touch. But I am going to say, I know you guys are ready to get on to other things on this beautiful Sunday. And I'm also going to say, I'm going to be texting you soon to do it again, because I feel like we're great at this. So
yeah, I'll have to get in touch with you and show you some, and share with you some. That's all I do. That's where I get my news.
well, I need you to do the show. I want to go over to Midas Touch with you, and if you're skilled, teach me or help me with doing those snippets.
My daughter used to do it. My daughter, Morgan, she used to do
I know
YouTube
when she was a baby.
when she was younger. She wasn't a baby, but she was 16, and she made
I
money.
knew her before you gave birth.
How old is she now?
Morgan is 21.
Oh my
He is 22.
my goodness.
22. I just bought my son a car.
Madison is going to be 20 this year. God,
Oh my
like where
God.
did the time go?
It just
Days take
you
forever.
don't look 21 years older than the last time I saw you. I'm sorry. And I'm not just saying
That's
that to
true.
be kind. Like it just doesn't seem reasonable that you have 21.
You don't
It's
see it
true.
today. Yeah. That's why I said stop saying 30 years. You're gonna when people do the math, you know what I'm saying? You're gonna notice.
We've known each other, haven't we? Aren't
Yeah.
we going close to knowing each other for that long?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It's
damn close.
close. It's
Well,
close.
this is my
Literally, me and my
this
wife have been together 23 years, and I've known you guys
this
minimum
summer this
7
summer
years
will be
before I ever met my wife. Minimum.
this summer will be 30 years since when I first started at Gator Stockside.
Yeah, and I came in
So
there shortly after.
that was 30 years ago, and I think I met you guys probably 2 years into that. I don't
Right,
think
but
I
I
was
was.
company at that point.
So we're going on 28 years.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I started in
Wow.
August of 99 at Gators. And I think I was like
That's 20. So that'd be 26 years.
They closed our store.
Yeah, he told me.
I got to drive
Some
by.
shenanigans, after some shenanigans with the COVID money, right? What a job.
Yeah.
that was a great job though. That was a fun job.
It was a fun job. I feel like my stepson he's like in his mid-20s, and it's so hard. It's hard for men to make new friends once they get out of their adolescent ages anyway, you know. And I feel like in these times even harder. And I always feel bad for him because it's hard for him. But he works in when you work in that age in an industry where almost everyone you work with is around your age.
Yeah.
It's such a nice outlet for people that you stay friends with. As we're saying, you're 30 years later.
30 years.
Because we were all kind of in the same boat at the same time. It made that part of life so much more enjoyable.
It did.
So I always try to push young people when they're struggling. I'm like, you need to find a job where you can have a cohort that you identify with and enjoy, because that makes.
We always did enjoy our time together at work. Yeah.
Absolutely.
No matter how rough things got, we always laughed it off and got through it.
Yeah.
I have to find a picture. I have a picture of it. I can't remember whose birthday it was, but there was a limo, and Charlie was there. Trippy, you were there. Melody was there. Chantel was there. Like I have.
Oh my God, Chantel. I see Trisha Shu on the Facebook sometimes now.
Trish and Joe, yeah, and they got.
Yeah, I'll look for it next time I see you. I'll hold the picture.
Sarah, I see Sarah on Facebook.
Oh, Sarah, yeah. Sarah.
She's got like her own like self-help business thing. She's got her own very interesting story arc. That's the weird thing about social media is that people that I have not seen face to face, including you guys, really, for over 20 years, and you feel like you feel like you do know that you have been, experiencing life with them all of these years because of social media. I think it's the one great benefit of social media that you really can. And then you go like, wait a minute, I haven't actually seen that person in 25 years, but I know about their life. They're married, their family, their kids.
That is a nice thing.
Yeah.
That is a beautiful thing. Yeah. All right, my friends.
All right, guys. It was good.
Well, let's like, share, subscribe, comment. I'm inviting everybody, anybody. Email me, politicalnobrainer@gmail.com. Tell me what you want to talk about. Candidates, concerned citizens, MAGA fanatics. You are welcome on this show. Whatever, we want to talk to you. We want to hear what you're thinking. We're open-minded.
Oh, yeah.
Amen.